This is the Non-Tech Podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture, with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranick. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located in Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Dr. Matthew Stranick, and I am located in Menakwisk in St. John, New Brunswick, which is situated on the traditional and unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik Maliseet people. Well, hey there, one and all. Welcome to episode 88 of the Non-Tech Podcast. By the time you are encountering this in video or audio, or I dare say in whatever other form, we're more than likely going to be in the month of December 2025. We are rapidly burning through the calendar here, ripping out those pages, and the year is coming really to an end. And I think the topic today is really quite amenable, if you want to say that, to the festive time of year. Certainly, that's a perspective that I'm taking on the topic. With me, as ever, Dr. Doug Reed. I am Matt Stranick. We're really glad you could join us. And the topic today is situational ethics in education. And when Doug slid this one into the Google Doc, you betcha I was interested. So first of all, Doug, how are things? How's your world going generally and or specifically, my friend?
Just for all the people that needed an update, I haven't taken a cold or flu medication in a week. So I am ecstatic. That is where the bar is at. So I'm super happy about that.
Awesome.
Yeah. So good overall. Good overall. I love when
Glad
my
to
nose
hear
doesn't
it.
run.
Yeah, any
you?
day without a major illness or malfeasance of any other variety, generally speaking, constitutes a good day, I'd say.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's where we're at. So yeah, super happy
Awesome.
with that.
Well, good stuff, Doug. So why don't you give us just a little bit of insight here into what prompted this particular topic? It's an awesome topic. I'm wondering what your thought process was when you were putting this one together, my friend.
Sure. I had a 3-pronged journey to this, and I didn't even realize they were prongs on a journey together. What happened was on my phone, I just have an old iPhone with the Non-Tech Podcast sticker on the back. I write little notes, like whenever I need to go to the grocery store, it's like get eggs, get milk, get onions, get whatever. And in my space where I write down my shopping that I need to pick up, I had a little note that I had put in there, and I didn't remember putting it in. And it was like, I am not a fan of situational ethics. So obviously something came across my feed talking about situational ethics. And so, okay, I saw that note when I ran out of eggs, so I needed to go get eggs. And then earlier this week, my wife was watching a documentary about the Nuremberg trials. And there was a heck of a lot of situational ethics there. And then I remember struggling. The very first interview we did, where your friend from South Korea that was a principal finished his doctorate. I forget his name.
Dr. Lee Smith, shouting you out, my friend.
Smith.
Yes, sirree.
When he was presenting and we were talking, and he's super guy, right? Really nice, obviously knowledgeable and all that stuff. There was some stuff he presented that I struggled with. And so I've been thinking about that for a year and a half, whatever it was. Like, it was a long time ago that you set all that up. And part of it was I didn't have the words to understand it. And it was like, oh, now that I know that it's situational ethics, I need to explore that. And that's the joy of this podcast. I would never have done this because I made it to this age and haven't explored it. So with the way we do things and the way it's like, okay, what's the topic going to be? It's like, okay, I guess I've explored it. Let's get this done. So that's how I approached the topic. That's where I came from. And so thanks for the opportunity and letting me indulge in all that.
Awesome. And just to go back a bit to the interview in question that Doug was speaking to, Dr. Lee Smith, when he joined us, was speaking on his doctoral thesis, which the title for was Moral Distress in Education. That was the topic. That was the main part of the title. And definitely there's a lot to think about. I actually haven't gone so far as to check out the completed thesis. Now that you mention it, I feel like I ought to. You mentioned it was a while ago and a year and a half ago, and day to day human terms definitely is, but in the life of, say, online asynchronous resources or publications or the like, it's really just the blink of an eye, honestly. And the
Yeah.
historical scope that tends to be brought to this show through the references, for those who follow the show with any regularity, you'll know that Doug is very big on going back sometimes into the 1800s. The early 20th century is certainly not uncommon, far and wide, hither and yon. And with my latest reading interests, I've been going back, spending a lot of time circa 500 before Common Era with some of the writers. And behind me, I wouldn't expect people to necessarily know, but that is Seneca, the esteemed Roman writer and orator and philosopher from about 65 AD, thereabouts, had a very storied life in addition to his writing and philosophical accomplishments relative to Stoicism. And there's a few tidbits related to him, which I feel are pretty cool and pretty relatable within the context of today's topic, which hence having him in the background here, the giant head behind the other giant head, so to speak. So appreciate the opportunity to bring some of these things up and go back on some of our past discussions here, Doug.
Yes. You just said something I need to write down for the. Sorry about that. Normally I type the phrase of the podcast in while you're talking, but you just you
We're
just dropped
taking
a
some
great
moments
one.
here. We are taking all the moments we need.
So what I've got with my literature that I'm going to share is I went back as far as I could in this topic, and it was 1957. And what's interesting, this is Sykes and Matza, Techniques of Neutralization. And they published in 1957, and then they revisited in 2017. So if you look at the citation, it's definitely not APA because you can't have two dates in there. But I didn't know how else to present it, and I couldn't find the original. The original's in a book or something. So however it works, I couldn't get access to the original, but the 2017 one popped up. So that's why I put both in. And
Awesome.
what's really wacky about this topic is because I always go to the old stuff, right? 1800s, early 1900s or whatever, talking about like situational ethics. This is the seminal article that other people use. And it is that situational ethics, when I started looking, that's in business leadership literature everywhere. It is like infused in business leadership ethics. But where it started was looking at student delinquency. That's where it started. So it didn't start a business. It wasn't a leadership thing. It was how do we stop these kids from cheating? And even into the 90s, that's what it was. Situational ethics was about how do we stop the students from cheating. So I just needed to bring it up that we went from students cheating and how do we investigate it to, hey, this is a model for leadership in business. And it's like, oh. So it was fascinating for me. Other people might think, okay, moving on, but I couldn't help myself. I just loved it. I just loved it. And not
I can
only
understand why. Yeah, definitely a very compelling area of practice to get into. 1957, I have to say, that's the year my mom was born. Shout out to Colleen upstairs. And as well, I just have to say that I appreciate how you're framing this in as much as the issues related to delinquency. I feel like that word is a bit of an anachronism. I think of the juvenile delinquent as kind of a
yeah,
cultural trope from the 1950s or 60s, something that's perhaps fallen to the wayside of our contemporary usage. So, delinquency, I think that's just a charming anachronism in and of itself. And again, for folks who have watched or participated in the show for any amount of time, not that long ago, year ago, thereabouts, we have spoken to issues involving the use of artificial intelligence, generative AI tools, which the largest or most prescient case usages that I can see for that are the questions of academic integrity and students who are taking works generated largely by AI applications and putting their names on them and submitting them as their own work. And thus,
yeah,
contextual ethics, the justifications that Sykes and Matza here from that article are speaking to, I've had some in teacher years, right, within 1 year of my personal experience as being something I've had to contend with in an AI context. The denial of responsibility, the denial of injury, the denial of the victim, the condemnation of the condemners, the appeal to higher loyalties. Well, I sat through something like 40 academic misconduct meetings during my time at another institution that I was at for a year. And within that was only in within one semester. And it was definitely a defining feature of my time, those hearings going through the program I was teaching in. So there's a lot of contemporary value, I think, speaking to this article ostensibly from 60, 65 years ago or what have you.
yeah, yeah. It made me laugh because your description just now, it wouldn't you love to have had a bingo card with these on it? And it's like as they started, it's like, oh yeah, hit denial of responsibility. Oh yeah, condemning the condemners. It's like yeah, you're playing the hits. You hit every single category of this stuff. So it's Sykes and
Outstanding in
Matza.
its own way. Yeah.
Oh, and if you have 15 minutes, go look at that article. It's in Google Scholar. It is fantastic because it's like 1950s academic, but it wasn't that deep. Let's use a whole bunch of wacky words in this certain context. They use a lot of plain English, which was nice, and they got to the point. It was a lovely article to read, and anybody that's been in a classroom and has had a student do stuff that isn't really appropriate, they will know all of these. They will know them all. These categories, they made me, when I found it, I was like, yeah, baby, this is it. This is the mother lode. This is worth it. And I didn't know this existed. Like I've stumbled through and I love reading the literature and getting more knowledge because it's like, yeah, that's what's going on. Right. They hit the 5 big categories. They put the thinking in with their big brains and here we are. And it is so much like even the appeal to higher loyalties. It's like, oh, it's not a big deal. I was doing this because I've listened to leaders say that. It's like, well, if I didn't do that, we'd all get shut down and then I wouldn't have a job. And it's like, I don't care. What you're doing is wrong. But right, if you're not going to do it right, why are you here? Right? Why just do it wrong? But anyway, that's part of my life story.
Well,
And
and
it
we're
was
still within the current academic, or not even the academic, sorry, but the calendar year, where the current occupant of the executive branch of the United States government, it's still been less than 365 days since that guy's second term. And you want to talk about years that can feel a lot longer. You want to talk about contextual ethics. It's sort of the embodiment here of it's all well and good if it benefits me personally and those closest to me. It can be justified in any which way, no matter how, right? And that to me is a symptom of the wider culture that we're involved in. And to look at it in terms of the time of year that we're getting into, we're entering the holiday period. Black Friday was just yesterday. I don't know, Doug, are you in on the Black Friday shopping shenanigans?
no.
I will cop to having spent about $300 or $400 between Amazon and Mark's Work Warehouse online to get some once in an annum kind of deals on some sneakers and some work clothes and the like. But it's a phenomenon as well wherein the holiday parties are going to be coming up. People's inhibitions are going to be somewhat challenged. People's normal ways of carrying on are
Mm-hmm.
going to be shifting with the seasonal flux towards the winter solstice, towards all these ancient festivals, winter festivals that predate Christianity in the modern era, largely. All of this sort of takes the normal way of doing things and puts them a bit on their head. And again, I think this makes this kind of an interesting topic relative to the time that we're going into here, my friend.
Yeah, another example I have of situational ethics is airlines. When you take a flight, like there have been times where I have flown out at 6 in the morning. Right, that's just welcome to life. That's when the airlines are going, and I've been with people that start drinking at the airport, and it's like it's 5 o'clock in the morning. What are you doing? And they're like, no, no, no. Airports don't count. Airports have their own time zone. And I'm like, okay, right? I am not going to drink at 5 in the morning. It's not happening, right? It's just okay. We have a special rule. This doesn't count because, and it's like, no. What Sykes and Mazda would call that is a delinquent subculture. That's the phrase they use. I put that in the notes, right? It's an inversion of the values held by respectable, law-abiding society, because that's 1950s lingo for something. But it just made me laugh. The turns of phrase that they used, I really enjoyed it, and I could bring it back to airport stuff because you do stuff at airports that just you wouldn't do anywhere else. Or I've
Ports
seen people
have
do
their
stuff.
own time zone.
Yeah.
That resonates for me. My sister is an Air Canada flight attendant. She's been with them for about a decade and a half. But even more than that, I remember when I was living overseas and traveling a lot, I will cop to thinking, well, it's 5 a.m. here, it's 5 p.m. somewhere. So your comment that airports have their own time zone, that is a phenomenon that I have been all too familiar with in the past. And that's why I was kind of chuckling a bit because that's a very interesting and commonplace way of speaking to the issue at hand, including
Yeah.
through Fletcher, 1966, going to the mid century, a few years before the Summer of Love, 1969. Do you want to speak to that one for us here a bit, Mr. Doug?
Sure. Now with Fletcher, one thing this actually got into the moral component of things, which is where I wanted to head, because I
Awesome.
base. And sometimes, like, I read a couple of articles where they said we use the word ethics and the word morals interchangeably, and it's like, what? It's like, okay, I don't think those are the same thing, but whatever. Thank you for addressing it and letting me know ahead of time. I don't care what you do as long as you signpost it and tell me, just so I know. So I appreciated that, but I didn't like the whole concept in general. So situational ethics help making when people make moral decisions, right? It's one of the avenues for that. There's also a legalistic component to things where people contend that moral rules are absolute laws and must always be obeyed. And that one resonates with me. That whole, if it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. Right? I don't care if I'm doing it in public or in private or in this situation or that situation. That's kind of where I live. And then the next one drives me bonkers. The third one that Fletcher comes up with is the antinomium, which contends that no guidelines exist, that each situation is unique and requires a new decision. This drives me around the bend because I have worked with those people. It's like, okay, I can never predict what you want. You're going to do whatever self-serving thing you want to do. And you're going to come up with a justification for it or a rationalization for it. So when they start talking about like decision making, it's not just rationalizing. It's okay, now we're moving forward. We're not defending what we did in the past. This is how I'm addressing things moving forward. And it's like, that's why there's some people I get along with and some people I just don't. Because if I can't trust you, if I can't predict what you're going to do, then you're going to be out there. There's going to be a distance between us until I know what you're going to do. Right? It's the same way. It's what's that line? If you don't like a dog, there's something going on with you. I don't trust people when they don't like dogs, but I do trust every dog that doesn't like a person. It's that sort of thing. It's like I trust if a dog doesn't like somebody, something's going on there. There's a reason. So it's
Really
that kind of
awesome examples here, Doug. You're really just bringing them up. And I got to tell you, on my little sheet of notes that I kind of scribbled out here in advance of our chat, I made specific mention of referring to, I've got right now about 8 or 9 or 10 books on the go where I just pick up certain chunks of them and then put them down and kind of cycle my way through. And eventually I do get through 1 or 2 of them at a time and then switch them in with new ones. But one of the ones that's been giving me a lot of enjoyment lately is reading here The Cynic Philosophers from Diogenes to Julian. And Diogenes, for those who don't know, because why would you? Diogenes of Sinope. He's from the 400s and 300s before Common Era, after Socrates, but before the Stoics. And again, people who have followed the show for a while will know that my interest in the Stoics is pretty deep seated and pretty long standing, hence Seneca and Marcus Aurelius and all the rest. But with Diogenes, he was known in his time as being the dog philosopher. In fact, they called him the dog. That was like the shorthand for him. Aristotle referred to the dog, and it was sort of understood that people would know who he was talking about through that colloquialism. Now, part of this was the fact that he was just so austere in his personal habits, living outside, living with very close to what we would consider a contemporary homeless sort of person, but with very strong personal and philosophic values that aligned with, as you've been saying, consistency. He was the same person out of doors as he would be indoors. And he chose to live in a way which physically embodied, and his followers too, because obviously he had followers for us to even know who he is. And one of his quotes, I don't know if it's something that actually was part of his biography or something that kind of got glommed on, but I wrote this down just because I enjoyed it so much. He was asked why do they call you the dog, right? One of his contemporaries in the public sphere. And his response reportedly was, because I fawn on those who give me anything and bark at those who give me nothing and bite the rogues. And I'm like, okay, I can dig this guy. I can really dig this guy. And again, you're a little speaking to if you don't like dogs. There was actually my mom's dog upstairs, who I've become quite good friends with, was literally just barking there. I don't think it got through the recording.
It didn't.
Your videos on Instagram, Doug, walking your dog pretty much every day, are charming as hell. And I'm glad you do it. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm up there smashing the like button every time I see one in my feed. So, folks, to wind this rather lengthy digression on my part down, I will say if you're on Instagram, look up Dr. Doug Reed. You will enjoy his videos of the dog walking in various parts around Prince Edward Island because, quite frankly, they're charming as hell.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And now you've opened up a whole new avenue of stuff I get to go look at. Because Diogenes, I'm not even sure how to pronounce his name.
Diogenes of Sinope. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, I've heard of him. Now I got to go read because it sounds like I'm going to like that. And thanks for hitting the like button on my. I need a place of happiness and a place of peace. That's what I drive towards. And so much of Instagram and social media is not a safe, happy place. So it's like, okay,
Absolutely.
I'm going to be part of a solution. And I have like 1,200 videos now of my dogs walking. And it's not me and the dogs, because I think every once in a while you can see my foot or my hand or something, but it's the dogs. And it's them being dogs, doing dog stuff.
Well, your captions and your occasional bits of narration during those videos are part of the vibe, right?
Yeah,
I've been known myself to blow up my Instagram every so often. I just get tired of it. That happened at one point over the summer. I was spending far too much time with DMs, American rock musicians, and the like. And I'm like, this no longer is bringing me joy. So I stepped away from it for a few months. And then I found a way back into it where it's like, okay, I'm going to use this to promote the podcast. I'm going to use this to share pictures of my children or share images of my St. John existence with my children who live in BC. Yeah. I've only got about 45 followers at this point. I don't even care a bit because that aspect of it doesn't even factor into how I present myself. It's very weird to me. I have a public quote unquote profile on my thing as opposed to just a regular profile. Somehow 3,900 people have looked at my profile in the past month, but I've only got 45 followers. So I don't know what that means. It's one of these things where we have close to 200 people looking at our website on any given month, and only 5 or 6 are watching the videos as per YouTube, 5 or 6, or maybe a dozen sometimes. I don't know how many people are smashing the audio button, but in whatever way, it's a product, it's online, people are engaging with it. I personally enjoy engaging with those videos, Doug. So thank you for that.
And I'm loving what you're pumping out in social media now. Like there's a level of peace there that is just so warm and welcoming. So good on you.
Be the change you want to see in the world. I think that's Gandhi, a paraphrase that gets attributed to him pretty often. Be the change you want to see in the world, i.e., through social media and online, because we spend so much of our times on and through online stuff. I literally did my doctoral thesis on social presence in online education, right? So, a whole lot of rabbit holes we could go down here, my friend, which I think is probably the sign of a robust and fertile conversation, if we may, this Saturday morning for both of us.
Yeah, that's very fair.
do we want to go back to the 1980s here with McNichols and Zimmerer, or do we have anything else we want to speak to with Fletcher before we make the shift?
No, I'm ready to make the shift. Now, with Fletcher, or sorry, McNichols and Zimmerer, 1985, Situational Ethics, an empirical study of differentiators of student attitudes. So still in the 80s, we are still looking at student delinquency and student cheating. We're still there. We haven't moved into the leadership literature yet. The business people haven't picked up on that yet, or the educational leadership, and we've already talked about that oxymoron in the past. So we don't need to go down there. There was one line. It's a nice article to read, and I know they talk about it. It's in the Journal of Business Ethics, but it was really about students. So it's still in the education framework, but it's like, oh, I bet we could publish it here. So I don't know if McNichols and Zimmerer are the reason why business picked it up and ran with it. And if they were, hey, good for them. Well done. But they talked about ethical absolutists. And ethical absolutists would hold that every real work situation can be judged in terms of a standard, which is both universal and unchanging. And this resonated with me. This helped me understand why I have struggled with situational ethics my entire life. Because I was talking to my wife earlier, and I said, oh yeah, I'm a situational ethicist. She laughed so loud. Like, you know those belly laughs that are just good for the soul? And then she just looked at me and she's like, yeah, no shit. It's like, you didn't know
Shout
that?
out to Erin.
Yeah.
Well done, Erin.
Yeah, she's much smarter than I am with that stuff. So yeah, I'm an ethical absolutist, which when I look back, like once I had the term, you know, it's weird when you get the language to hold on to, then it's like in Piaget, when that one piece of the puzzle gets put together, everything else gets built around it, but everything else was already there. I just didn't have the language to connect it all together. And yeah, that explains my teaching style. My teaching style is what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. And I never hide it. It's when I first start teaching a class, especially like undergrads or postgrads, it's like, we're going to do it different than what you're used to. I need you to trust me until you get to know me. And the students are like, ooh, okay. And then after a couple of weeks, I make sure they can trust me before the drop date so they don't lose any money on tuition and stuff. And they're like, oh, we get it now. You're not trying to trick us. You were telling the truth. And it's like, yeah, absolutely. When I go into meetings, everybody has this hidden agenda that's not particularly hidden. And I say mine out loud. I want what's best for the students. That's my goal. Sometimes I have paid for that. Sometimes I've been really messed over by it, but my goal is always the same. I'm an educator. I'm here to make the students' lives better. And if I can do it through helping the instructors or the professors or the teachers or the whatever, great. That's why I'm here. I am not here to feather my own ego. That could not interest me less. If that happens, great. That's nice. But as a guy, how often do guys ever get complimented anyway? So I never worry about that. But just having the word ethical absolutist just helped cast a light on something I've been looking at for so long. And now I have like an intellectual standpoint in which to view the leadership that I've experienced in the past and the leadership I'm sure you experience moving forward, just to say, oh, okay. And it just felt so nice to have that in the literature and say, okay, I can go back and examine that term, but the term is so well phrased. It's like a lot of your phrases, right? They're just, you say it and you're like, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's fantastic. So I'm just wondering with ethical absolutism, right? Is that something you saw from me? Because I didn't realize I was doing it. I thought I was just rigid.
When the term is cropping up like that, I can see the appeal. I can see the applicability. I appreciate your complimentary language in terms of how I would tend to phrase things. I know exactly what you mean when you find a phrase or a concept that just absolutely encapsulates what you have been about, but haven't necessarily had the terminology for. It's like, okay, I can hang my hat on this, so to speak, right? And so, to that effect, I would say it definitely is in keeping with what I know about you as a person. The fact that you and I, our time at the institution in Kamloops where we both worked, our time only overlapped by about a year and a half or something like that. It wasn't even really that long. It wasn't as long as we've been doing this podcast by any
No, not
stretch of the
even close.
imagination. And yet, the first couple of times I encountered you, as you were a new staff member, I'd been there for a couple of years at that point. I knew, apart from the regional affinity, apart from the fact that you were another guy from the Maritimes, which meant a lot to me out there in BC, that just the way that you spoke, the way that you carried yourself, I'm like, okay, this person is consistent in their messaging in terms of how they are presenting their thinking and their presentation of that thinking. It's in close alignment, right? And I think that's something that helped me feel like you were somebody I could pitch the notion of this podcast to. And I'm so glad that I did, because now the pre-podcast era is almost like a precursor to what we've been up to for these past
Mhm.
3.5 years, right? Since the fall of 2022 when we began with this stuff. So I wholeheartedly endorse your endorsement of that phrase. I have to tell you, my perspective on this was a little bit kind of whimsical, a bit, in as
Yeah.
much as I'm single. I've been single for a while. I've gone out on dates. I've been on dating apps. And just this very day, earlier this morning, late last night, whatever, I was on Tinder, which, again, take it with a grain of salt. God help us all. But a woman, a very attractive woman in her early 40s, matched with me on Tinder. And on her sort of bio area was like, I am a Christian looking for a Christian man. And I went, I could be a Christian man. I like Jesus. I like Jesus a lot. He's been part of my life. I have what I consider a pretty deep and significant relationship with Christ as an entity, right? A spiritual and cosmic entity, an historical personage and philosopher and everything else. And I smashed the like button and we matched. And then this morning I got up at around 7 o'clock or whenever it is. And the first thing that this person said in the chat was, Matthew, are you a saved Christian? And I kind of just thought, I don't know. Am I? I could be. Saved Christian. That's got a lot of semantic baggage associated with it. And I thought, well, just like I said, I like Jesus. I've liked Jesus for a long time. You know, I'm like, okay, situational ethics, right? Okay, sure. I'm a saved Christian. Why not? And that probably means that I'm going to go to hell. And it probably means that this, at the very minimum, Tinder match is going to flame out at some point because I'm not taking it as seriously, I think, as this person would have me take it. But at this point, I mean, I haven't checked my phone in the past half hour, 40 minutes or so, but we're still engaged in some kind of dialogue through this stupid app, right? So, situational ethics, circumstances outside of education are sometimes maybe a little bit more loosey goosey for me than what I might impose upon myself within the context of a educational setting or role. I've interviewed for a pretty cool role here in St. John the past week. I have an interview for an interesting role in the Northwest Territories next week. And all of those situations would dictate professional ethics and morality and associated concepts and ways of carrying myself that well outside the scope of a dating app. Let's just put it that way. Well outside the world of Tinder or Facebook dating or Hinge or whatever. Anyway, pretty long digression and somewhat maybe presenting a foil to your very serious and thoughtful discussion here, Doug.
No, but we are the Ed Non-Tech podcast. So the technical bit, we're going to come back to social media and all that stuff in the final reference. I wanted to tie it all in. I try to make sure we have at least one technology citation. So we'll definitely come back to that.
Well, are we ready then to go to this McCabe 1992? Because there's an outstanding table here. Outstanding. I love that table from McCabe, Doug.
I put that in for you. I
Thank
saw
you.
that table and I had started. I couldn't copy and paste out of this article. Like, sometimes you get these file formats and it just won't let you copy and paste certain chunks. It was driving me nuts. So I was starting to rewrite it. And I'm like, what am I doing? Right? Like, take a screen grab and dump that sucker in there. So anyway, McCabe 92, the influence of situational ethics on cheating among college students. That's where we're coming from. So still in the 90s, it's still basically a lot of the literature was about students and student behaviors. And this table is so awesome because it's about the rationalization for student cheaters. And the title of the table is Neutralization Strategies, Self-Admitted Cheaters. And I have, again, we've both sat in those meetings and it's like, dude, I know you ripped this off. I know this is not your work. And then it's the various strategies. It's like, one of these will work. Like, I remember years and years and years ago, I was teaching elementary school and the cuteness level, like all these kids, like I was teaching grade 4, I think. So all the kids are cute, right? They're just adorable and lovely and all that. And this one girl came up and she was doing whatever. She didn't want to do something and she had done something to somebody else. And she came up and she looked up at me with the big puppy dog eyes and she was starting to like the fake tear and all that. And I just looked at her and I'm like, does that work at home? I literally, that's what I said. And she's like, yes. I was like, do you think that's working here with me today? She's like, no. It's like, own up to it.
Now she's really upset because it's not working on you.
Because it's not working. And it's like, you need to own up to what you did. And how are you going to fix it? Because this is on you. You did it. How are you going to fix it? And then she went away and fixed it. She sorted it out. I wasn't the white knight trying to rescue her. I wasn't the person she was getting one over on. And it was just, so she was 10. And I've used the same thing I've used it with coworkers. It's like, hey, you just presented all kinds of my stuff and then cut me out. I had that happen at TRU. I put a big presentation together and then the person in charge said, no, your internet connection is not good enough. And it's like, no, I have a better internet connection. No, you're out. Took my name off my presentation, presented it as if it was hers. But she was just one of those. A lot of lovely people at TRU, and there's a couple of vicious, nasty people there. And I, unfortunately, was underneath a vicious, nasty person for a while. So
I am visualizing the people in question. We both
person, you know who it is.
I definitely know who it is.
Yeah.
And this kind of puts me, first of all, thank you for the personal anecdote with the kids. That's just charming as heck.
Yeah.
I've been doing volunteer work in a middle school lately, which has segued into a possible job opportunity working with some younger kids and specifically younger kids with behavioral issues. And so during the interview process, we kind of ran through some scenarios, and I actually got to use the term loco parentis in the interview
Nice.
to speak
Nice.
to the expectation, right, that educators have when working with younger kids, where you're supposed to take the vantage point of what would a judicious parent do in this situation? What would a judicious parent think or act in this situation? And I actually use that term to speak to the scenario that was presented to me with the hypothetical difficult child who may or may not have special needs or neurodiversity or whatnot. And it was really an interesting opportunity to speak to some of these issues, to emphasize the need for firmness, consistency, but that doesn't rule out a flexible approach. That doesn't rule
Right.
out moment by moment making adjustments to suit the circumstances. I said in the interview that kids, I know this from my own kids as well as whatever teaching experiences, that kids have an inbuilt way of sensing inequity, and it just can sour the relationship in a moment. If there's a hint of inconsistency or unfairness, they just won't stand for it. They haven't developed the adult rationalizing principles which go, oh, well, okay, I can take this person's slides and just take their name off of it because they work for the institution and they're a property of the institution because they work for
Yeah.
the institution. They don't have that ability. They don't, right? So some
I
interesting confluences here in terms of the experiences that we've been talking to here, Doug.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine have that happen at Nate. He wrote a paper, and then his boss took his name off it, took it to a conference in Hawaii, and presented it there. It was the same.
So cheesy, so cheesy. How could you even live with yourself doing that? I don't understand.
Well, that's
Anyway.
it. I couldn't, but some people definitely do. So coming back to McCabe in
Yep.
'92, McCabe basically took the Sykes and Matza material and statistically analyzed the crud out of it, and even put it like denial of responsibility, mind blocks, or no understanding of the material, right? Like that was what they were falling back on to rationalize the cheating behavior, or condemnation of condemners. This assignment was pointless, right? Or I have no respect for the professor. It's like you're rationalizing your cheating because you don't like the professor, right? How is it the professor's fault that you didn't learn the material? I'm not saying all professors are educators, because some of them definitely aren't, but it's like, give me a break. Or the appeal to higher loyalties. Oh, I was just helping my friend out. Oh, we all got together and we're all doing it. How come you're picking on me? Or the denial of injury, right? Cheating's harmless. It's not a big deal. Nothing. It doesn't matter. Who cares? Like all the rationalizations. And I've heard almost all of those in my career. And it just made me smile to say, oh, thank goodness somebody looked at this. But again, if we weren't doing this podcast, I never would have got the satisfaction of finding this information out. It makes me feel better that I'm not nuts, because those people that do the rationalizations, they are going to spin the world and try to convince you you're the problem. So to see this, like, no, this isn't me. This is all kinds of people. I just really enjoyed it. And I'm wondering, do you have a favorite? Do you have one of these that makes your head shake? It's like, really? Are you trying this? Are you kidding me? Right? That's where I go with it now. I'm just wondering if you have a similar type of reaction to that.
Well, the denial of injury, that whole part of the table, it doesn't surprise me at all that this area has got a lot of clout in the field of business studies, because we've talked about before how the qualities of a cheater are very often those mercenary impulses, which make people take risk, which make people, they're a bit myopic. They sort of see the monetary or financial or strategic value of acting in certain ways outside of conventional morality, and in so justifying that. So, for instance, taking Jimmy Fallon off the air will result in greater clout with the Trump administration, for instance, or Jimmy Kimmel, sorry, Jimmy
Jimmy
Kimmel,
Kimmel.
for instance, right? Or, for instance, doing certain kinds of executive decisions or leadership calls that are ostensibly for the better of the organization, but really are just shortcuts, really are just ways of taking the path of least resistance without deferring to appropriate process, without resorting to any kind of moral reckoning. It's simply, okay, the ends will always justify the means, but I can't actually say that. And only because that tends to fly in the face of conventional morality. But the underlying assumption with those decisions are effectively denial of injury, that it all is abstract in the end, that it all is justified by the benefits of getting away with something, and everybody will applaud you once you've kind of gotten away with something. Better to ask permission, or sorry, better to, what is it? The phrase escapes me. It's explain yourself
Easier to
after
get
rather than asking.
easier to get forgiveness than to ask for permission.
There we go. There
Yeah.
we go. Right. Something along those lines. So thanks for the opportunity to reflect on this really outstanding table, folks. I do recommend, among the other visuals that we're going to be speaking to here, checking out the website for these notes where you can see it in all of its tabular glory.
Yes, it is very much an early 90s academic diagram, and I am of that nerddom that really enjoys how it's laid out and what it says. For me, one last thing on denial of injury. What drives me nuts when people say things like, oh, it's just business, it's not personal. It's like, yep. It's like, bug off. It is personal. You're doing this to me, and you're trying to get rid of any responsibility. It's, oh, this is the way we've
100%.
always done it. It's like, ugh. Anyway, I'll leave that alone. I'm going to jump to NACAR 2025, and it's navigating ethical landscapes, and it's vocational educators' adaptations through and beyond COVID-19. So we're very up to date. The pandemic absolutely happened, and we're taking a look at a lot of the technology bits that change things, right? Like the application of situational ethics proves particularly illuminating in understanding how teachers experience moral distress when forced to choose between competing ethical imperatives. And a whole lot of teachers were put in horrible positions with their ethics. And you want to talk about burnout, and you want to talk about, here's the guilt, because educators are people that say yes, right? We don't do it for the money. We want enough to survive, but we do it to help people. Like the caring professions take it worse. I firmly believe that. And it's when we take a look at the teacher's experiences, it's like paradigmatic ethical situations, circumstances where conventional ethical frameworks prove inadequate and require contextual wisdom. It's what do we do? Right? It's like, remember that day in March 2020 where everything shut down? Like the world as we knew it came to an end. It's like, okay, everything's new now. And people stayed home. and people had to take care of their own kids at home, and teachers had to teach somehow. None of these teachers were teaching fully online, right? And now suddenly it's, here we go, here's the situation. And so technology was used as a crutch, basically to beat educators, is what it was. And then you have all the social impacts of the anti-vaxxers, right? No, why are we doing this? I have a right to. And it's like, bug off. Just bug off, right? Like, yeah. So for our audience, if you're an anti-vaxxer, we're doing fine. You can leave. I I do not need to deal with you. Or if you want to stay cool to get a different perspective on things, it's anyway. I'm not getting into that, but I'm getting into the pressures that were put on educators and the trauma that was involved with the situational ethics that got imposed upon people that may not have the fluidity in their ethics that some other people with power do have. And I'm wondering what your thought is on that, because I probably said a few things that are inflammatory in there.
Well, that's incredibly eloquent, actually, is what I was thinking. You really, every time we speak to the pandemic, it seems like there's new insights to draw from the reference and how we respond to the reference. I would just agree with you wholeheartedly on the position of certain individuals and groups who really took advantage of a public health crisis to move forward certain political agendas, particularly on the right wing of the spectrum, because to me, the anti vaxxer group were almost all associated very largely with the conservative and extreme conservative aspect or side of the political spectrum, the political movement. It's the same kind of people who came out in favor of truck convoys, right? Blocking the streets of Ottawa. And to bring it back to online dating, because I've been single for 4.5 years, which is wild, but in the course of engaging with people through these apps, in the course of meeting people sometimes in person, you just find some things out. I've had some incredible experiences, no doubt, some incredible insights into the human nature. I just remember in Kamloops, it was 2023 thereabouts. It was still within the scope of like the pandemic being a relatively recent thing. And this person who she said she used to be a nurse, and I met her, and she said she refused to get vaccinated. She was a nurse who refused to get vaccinated, and so she lost her job. And she was kind of testing me to see what I thought of that. And I just kind of sat there with a blank look on my face, just thinking, I'm only a third of the way through this meal. I can't just get up and leave. So the non-response was the best I could do. And then as soon as we got out of the restaurant, I'm like, match, I'm never going to see you again, you weirdo. Um, Kind of not the most academic or professional example, but if we're talking about certain vantage points, people who have issues, people who have deep seated personal or psychological concerns, and they find a public health or some other kind of issue where their behavior can negatively impact other people, it's sort of turning themselves into victims a bit, which is certainly what I saw as an underlying pathology with that cohort, generally speaking. So thanks for the opportunity to speak to that, I suppose, Doug.
Well, that ties back to the Fletcher 66 article with the antinomian conceptualization of ethics, where they talk about no guidelines exist. Each situation is unique and requires a new decision. That's the mindset that was forced upon so many educators when the lockdowns happened. So, like, I know how to teach. I got my classroom management style. I got my prep style. There's how I do assessment. And then suddenly it's like everything's on its head because now you're using this technology and you're doing it from home. And you also have to take the curriculum that still exists, and we're not letting you modify the curriculum. You still have to, if that's still imposed on you. And it's taking a look at competing ethical imperatives. And it was, I feel like I was in there. I was a K to 12 teacher. I've talked about this on the podcast. I needed to get my pension moved from one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction so I could feel like I was going to get a pension. So that's why I picked up a teaching job. And it was just one of those things. It was like, okay, I'm in the middle of this and this is crazy. Right? I know I was a world expert in online learning for a while, right? Back when I was actively engaged with doing my research in it and stuff. And I was an expert on educational technology, right? Like, I have an article, the last time I checked, had 75,000 reads, right? Which is crazy. But so I know some stuff, and I'm in this situation. It's like, whoa, holy moly. And I had the background and way more knowledge and way more experience than the average teacher. And I'd also been to other countries and see how they do it. So I have all that context. And I was still to the overwhelmed stage. So I can't imagine the person that got their BED and was just in the thick of it, especially if they didn't have a permanent contract already. And like all those things, like moral distress is the phrase that exists. And I understand the situational ethics that had to happen. But it was just, wow, we still haven't come to grips with this, because the ethical imperatives are what? I still want to help people, but I need to be able to go home and breathe, right? And not just collapse and be a functional human being in the rest of my life. So it was all this, like, Nicara really brought it all together for me, especially with the impact of the technology, because it wouldn't be so bad if the technology didn't allow online learning to happen. Because then other things would have been put into place. Other infrastructures would have been structured in to say, okay, here's how we're doing it. And I just thought it was a nice way to wrap it up. I really enjoyed this because I have been struggling with this for a long time. And I didn't have the words. And now I kind of do. I have the words to do a further leap into the literature to help clarify stuff.
Absolutely. And I certainly appreciate all that you've spoken to in terms of observing the phenomena as it rolled out in our not so distant past. Hopefully, there have been lessons learned in terms of how educational processes and how educational infrastructure can be effectively deployed in the event that another pandemic comes down the line, whenever that may be. I think, just as something to kind of bring us down here to the end of the hour, just about, and to, I guess, contemporize the situation, but also going back in time a bit to 63, 64 AD, just a bit. I wanted just to share a paragraph, the opening paragraph of Seneca's letter number 18. It was written late in one of the last years he was alive. He died just before the age of 70. He was ordered to kill himself by the Emperor Nero, and he didn't know this at the time. He just thought he was a retired guy in his late 60s, and he's having this kind of correspondence. But the paragraph, the first paragraph of this letter, just kind of puts me in the mind of what we've just been talking about, but also the present time of year, if you will. So if you could just indulge me here. It is the month of December, and yet the whole city is in a sweat. Festivity at state expense is given unrestricted license. Everywhere there echoes the noise of preparations on a massive scale. It all suggests that the Saturnalia holidays are different from the ordinary working day, when the difference is really non existent. So much so, in fact, that the man who said that December used to be a month, but now is a year, was, in my opinion, not far wide of the mark. For those who may not know about the Saturnalia holidays, that was when, in the middle of December, to, I suppose, mark the shift into winter proper, one of the festivals, one of the major festivals in Roman times, ancient Roman times, was with Saturnalia, where for one day slaves were free and their masters had to be absent or to serve their slaves. And it was a huge deal in terms of a sort of social valve of blowing off steam. But to speak to Seneca here, it's almost as though the entire month gets kind of eaten up with this festival and the preparing for it and everything that that entails. Not very much unlike the whole Black Friday to New Year's period, which we're about to enter, which we are starting to enter right now. So I've just thought that was kind of a nice thing to gloam on to the end of our discussion on situational ethics, Doug.
Nicely put. That is a nice way to wrap it up.
Awesome. So, do we want to now speak to some of the very compelling visuals? I noticed we got a lot of Dilbert in here. Doug, are there any of these that are jumping out at you? And folks, we are going to be trying a new feature on the video format where some of these visuals are not just going to be in the notes, but they're going to be in this very video recording, starting, I suppose, as you're watching the video contemporaneously right about now. So, are there any of these that you want to include within the video clip for
Now,
some observation here, Doug?
just to let you know, these come from my digital clutter, right? And I know you're aware of it, but readers may not be. Anything that I find interesting over the years, I've done a screenshot of and I've thrown in a file. And I was doing that a lot when I did my master's in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so the Dilbert ones kept coming up because they were easy to do screenshots of. There was some ways some cartoons and stuff weren't. So they're there, and they're all about more about business leadership than we really got into in the podcast. And I enjoy them all. They're all fun, right? They're all Dilberts. I own the screen capture, but I don't own the copyright or whatever intellectual property on it. But the one I really wanted to share was Bertrand Russell's 10 Commandments. That spoke to me because Bertrand Russell's Bertrand Russell, right? You can have your own opinions on that fellow, but a lot of what he said in his 10 Commandments were really nice. It's like, yeah, don't lie to yourself, don't lie to others unless they're exercising tyranny. Because if they are exercising tyranny, right, the rules are off because we have a social contract, right? So being a nice person doesn't mean being nice to everybody. If somebody's being miserable to you, you don't have to be nice to them, right? The social contract works both ways. If they choose not to honor it, then you're free to not honor it, in my humble opinion. Right? When you think it's your duty to inflict pain, scrutinize your reasons closely. And it goes on and on and on. But when I found this years and years and years ago, it's like, wow, yeah, I agree with this. This is where I'm coming from. And this is part of my ethical absolutism, right? It's, if you want to know what I'm going to do, it's this. And that's where I try to do it, right? Like when I've had power, when I've run teams, the teams like me because I help build them up. I don't constrict them. I don't keep them down. I don't take credit. I've been criticized for giving too much credit to my teams. I'm like, I have a big enough ego, right? I know how smart I am. I'm pretty self-aware when it comes to that and what my abilities are. And I'm the first to admit it. So why would I steal your credit? Right? why? It doesn't make sense to me, right? It's just one of those things with how I fit. So there's 10 of them there, like be reliable, be just. These make sense to me. And some people hate this. Some people do not believe that this is the way people should live their lives. And it's like, okay, you're going to be a person that dogs don't like. So I'm going to just take a step back and be very careful when I engage with you and deal with you. So I really like the Bertram Russell stuff, right? So I skipped over the Dilberts, but there's 6 images there. Please go take a look. Unless you have one, is there one that you enjoyed more than others, or?
Was going to refer to the Bertrand Russell. The listing here is pretty awesome. This was new to me, this graphic, I got to say. I like number 5, which you've kind of already alluded to. When you have power, use it to build up people, not to constrict them. Boy, oh boy, that is something which, if I could just put that as a bumper sticker or put that on a t-shirt every time I go to a faculty meeting, boy, oh boy, I just feel like some of the situations or contexts which we've even spoken to this very hour, the absence of that was palpable. I've also had the opportunity to work with leaders who were the embodiment of that, not
Yes.
nearly as often as the opposite, but still definitely some notable folks who did a good job of that. I like number 10, be good natured. That's actually something that Marcus Aurelius mentions a lot in his meditations to himself, where it's almost as though he's has to remind himself about it, that he feels it's a tendency that he doesn't necessarily have, but just to recognize that it's a privilege to be in the service of the public, that being an educator or an emperor or in whatever capacity that you happen to exist, your professional or social cohort is fundamentally reliant on serving other people. And so part of it is being good natured, bringing your best energy to it, and having the habits which allow that best energy to shine through in the situation that you happen to be in at whatever level. So I guess we were both pretty enamored with this list from Bertrand Russell, which has been featured prominently, you can betcha, thanks to Camtasia, in the video clip here. And Doug, I
And
think that does bring us to
just before it
word and
brings us
phrase in
to an end,
question.
number 10, that's the hardest for me, right? Be good natured, because I try to be. I work really hard at it, but there are times I need to remind myself to be good natured, because
You and Marcus
I'll
Aurelius. Yeah,
I'll take that, right? I'll take that comparison, because it's like there's just times where it's like, why am I being such a grump? Why am I being in this mood, right? Why did I just treat that person that way? It's not helping anybody. It's that Calvin and Hobbes cartoon. Nothing helps a bad mood like spreading it around. It's so I need
it
to
helps.
work on
It
that.
helps to analyze your social interactions afterwards frequently. That was something, again, from Marcus, which he exhorts himself to. He puts it to his normal practice to consider what's gone down in a given day and to find what he could have done better. And the whole notion of constructive self reflection, it's not just limited to B.Ed or M.Ed students writing assignments for their credit. It's really helpful for anybody. So I couldn't agree with you more, Doug, on that score.
You still say cool things. Sorry, I'm typing again because you just pulled out another thing that I thought was awesome. So
Appreciate you.
anyway, word of the podcast is situational, because that's where we started, and it's talking about, well, a lot of my struggles with situational versus more absolute ethics. So situation is the word. Question is, how do people justify having situational ethics in educational contexts? And there's a couple of references, the 57 reference and the 66 reference talk about the neutralization strategies or the rationalization strategies. It's like, what are we doing? Why? Just learn this stuff. But anyway, that's where we're at. Phrase of the podcast, there's two of them. The giant head behind the other giant head just made me laugh. So I really like that. Yeah, between you and Seneca. And the other one was mine. It was airports have their own time zone. Because again,
Awesome. Very true. Very awesome. I'm glad you've got that one in, Doug. I was thinking as you said that should be a phrase of the podcast. So I'm glad we were on the same wavelength with that one. Outstanding, my friend.
thanks. And that's what we've got.
That is what we've got. That's what we've had. And that's what hopefully you have enjoyed. Constant audience, whoever you may be, wherever you are, whenever you are. It's going to be December by the time this makes its way to the public forum, I suppose, as it were, give or take. I'm thinking it's the second last day of November right now, so early December feels reasonable for this. I've certainly enjoyed our time together. Doug, is there anything else you wanted to say here before we sign off?
No, nothing at all. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'm looking forward to engaging with our audience as it happens.
Take care, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye bye.